It's Super Videos back at you for another video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what is wrong with Season 7. And I'm also going to be talking about my opinions on the ratings dropping for Season 7. So I think the main part of why Season 7 has such a big disapproval rating and why fans are so angry at Season 7 and why the ratings are dropping, it's because of the bottle episodes, also the structure of the episodes, so what we're getting for each episode and the order. So that, in my opinion, is the base of why this is happening, why fans are so disappointed with Season 7. For example, Episode 2 was The Well. We got introduced to the kingdom and the things that happened at the kingdom, with Morgan and Carol finding their way to the kingdom and everything that happened in that episode. But in my opinion, that didn't need to be a bottle episode, and it didn't need a lot of the things that were included in it. Some scenes definitely needed room to breathe, but there was definitely scenes that were in that episode just to fill up the episode because they had to. Because it was a bottle episode, they couldn't concentrate on anything else, and they just had to put those scenes in there. For example, the scenes with Carol stealing things at the kingdom. That happened like 2 or 3 times. Now, you can definitely show that, but you don't need to keep repeating it. And that's just one example. The same thing goes with The Cell, which was episode 3, which was basically a sanctuary-centric episode and getting introduced to Sanctuary and finding out inner workings of the Sanctuary to an extent, and also seeing what happened to Daryl when he was captured by the Saviors and taken back to the Sanctuary. So again, there were a lot of scenes from that episode, a lot more than episode 2, I would say, that could have been trimmed. There was that whole thing with the Easy Street soundtrack playing as Daryl is trying to sleep. That was done a lot more than they needed to. The intro was long and didn't really add a lot, in my opinion, and things like that. So you can see how these episodes could definitely have been trimmed down. Same thing goes with the episode with Tara and Heath. But I think for that episode, it needed to be a bottle episode because it didn't have a lot of connections to the other episodes that we've seen so far. So I'm going to give them a pass on that episode. I think that needed a bottle episode. It didn't need to be as long as it was, for sure, but it definitely did need to be a bottle episode. Now I'm going to talk about something that they should have done. I'm basically going to tell you my opinions on how the season should have been structured up to this point. Now there's one thing you need to remember. With the way I have it planned out right now, the way I wanted to see it, it would only take 4 episodes. So if they wanted to fill it for 6 episodes, then this structure will not work, but it would have been better because of the connections and everything that happens that I'm going to talk about. So let's start. Episode 1. I think episode 1 was good the way it was done. It was emotional and it needed everything that it had. There was no need and there was no way to add any other components to that episode. So that episode was good. But episode 2, in my opinion, could have been better if it basically merged what they had for 2 and 3 together. So we could have seen the Sanctuary and everything they shown there, with some parts trimmed, like I said, and they could have also shown us the kingdom as well. Morgan and Carol on their way to the kingdom and things like that as well. Now think about the interesting dynamic that would have happened that way, because we would have seen how Negan kind of runs things at the Sanctuary, and then they could have basically connected parts of that with King Ezekiel and how he runs the kingdom. And they could have kind of went back and forth with showing us how one parallels the other. I think it would have been a great thing. And I think that would have added a lot of value to the episode. Also, when you have Ezekiel, Richard, and the others feeding walkers to the pigs and then giving those pigs to the saviors, and then if you parallel that with what happened with Daryl because they were feeding him dog food, that kind of parallel is also very interesting, and it would have added a lot of value if you put them together. Also, you have, like I said, people at the kingdom, Ezekiel and the others, basically giving these pigs that have been fed walkers to the saviors. And then it would have been great if we could also see those saviors make their way back to the sanctuary, and that would basically lead to the sanctuary, and that could have been the trigger of it. I think there's a lot of things that they could have done if they merged those two episodes together. Similarly, if we take a look at episodes 4 and 5, we can see if they merged those together, it would have also been very interesting, and a lot of things would have connected, and there would have been a lot of parallelism that they could have used. For example, we have Negan making his way to Alexandria and coming for his first offerings. And in the same process, we see him providing a service to the Alexandrians by killing a couple walkers. And in the same way, you could parallel that with showing other saviors and Simon making their way to the hilltop and showing that they were going to provide that service to the hilltop and also getting their offerings as well in there too. So that would have been a crazy dynamic to have as well. In the same way, you could have also shown Maggie and Sasha mourning over Abraham and Glenn's death. And in the same way, you could have kind of shown that at Alexandria as well. They didn't really show a lot of that in that episode, but they definitely needed to. For example, we could have seen Rick, Michonne, Rosita, and the others kind of reflecting on the deaths and mourning these deaths. And, to connect the two together, like showing Daryl come to Alexandria and looking like he's guilty, basically having shame for causing Glenn to die, and then you can basically jump to the hilltop and show Glenn in his grave and show Maggie crying. Another detail that they could have added is the whole thing with Father G, how he lied to Negan saying that Maggie is dead. And if we kind of parallel that with showing that Maggie is in fact at the hilltop and alive, it would have added a lot of value to showing that Father G was definitely playing Negan. And kind of explicitly showing that and connecting the dots would have been very interesting as well. The other thing that I can think of is, how in episode 4, Negan referred to Glenn as number 2 because he killed him second? Then you could also kind of parallel that with the graves, because at the graves, you have one grave where there's just a stick in there, which is Abraham's, and then you have another grave where there's a stick with 2 points coming out of it for Glenn. And you could reflect on those because Negan is referring to Glenn as number 2, and then also at the hilltop they're actually using a 2-pointed stick to identify Glenn as well. So I think that would have been very cool to see as well, those connections. And then the next episode could have been the Tara and Heath centric episode that they gave us. And like I said, if they do this, that would have been only like 4 episodes. So they would have needed to add some other things as well to fill up the whole season. But I think just looking at the things that I just explained, you can see how cool that would have been to see something like that and how much value would have been added to the episodes. And I think if they did something like that, there would be less fans who were angry about season 7 and the ratings wouldn't have dropped the way they have. But I want your opinions about this. What do you think about what I just explained? Do you think that they did a smart thing by having these bottle episodes and kind of breaking it into separate locations and concentrating on each location in each episode? Or do you think that the way I just explained or something along those lines would have been better? That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll be back for another video.